Okay. I'm on, so I'm going to continue on now with the practice session. And so now I'm thinking that I continue on with this chord thing because that's what I'm working on in my course right now with this chord construction. But I'm thinking lean back chords now. So now instead of bar chords leaning forward, we do the lean back chords, which means we're doing from a caged system like the G chords, right, which would be this, but if you leaned it back, it would be like this if you just play the top bit. So we're mainly focusing on the top bit of like a G-shaped chord. And if it was a minor chord, then this would be back, right, like that. So that means I'm just going to choose all the notes that are in our collection of notes that are around the key of C. Once again, the way I would like to name the system is to say we're going to build the 7-note collection around the key of C because that's basically the convention. So I'm looking at the 7-note collection, applying the major scale formula around the Ionian or C here, giving us our 7-note collection. And then I'm just going to go through each of the points at the top again, but instead of making what I call a lean forward shape, grabbing like the 5 up here for the power chord, make a lean backwards shape, which means that the third is either going to be here or here, right? And then the fifth is always going to be here. So the fifth is always the same, and then the third will alternate depending on whether we're talking major chord construction that's built off of a major mode, major modal chord, or a major minor modal chord. You can call that a major chord or minor chord if you want, but I'd rather call it by the nodes that we're on because it's more specific. It's more specific. And so that's what we need to do. It's the Pythagorean. I'm going back to Pythagorean, and because he'd want numbers in the music. He'd want numbers in the music would make Pythagoras proud. Mathless music, Pythagoras would be ashamed. He'd be ashamed of that. And so we're gonna go back. I've been listening. I don't know Latin from my Pythagorean school, but I've been listening to preachers, and then YouTube converts it to Spanish, right? So I could do because that's close to Latin, kind of, So it's like I have to do. Well, I'll do that. Maybe I'll get into. Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that, but we need to do the Pythagoras logic-based systems. None of this where every note has like one name, right? We should say this is the name. This is the name of the note. It's not like just like the note just rolls over one day and it's like, oh, today I feel like being called this, and the next day, no, you have a number, and that's your number. That's what you get. That's what we call you, and I don't care what. And then we build on that. If you keep changing your name, then it's hard to build on it. That's the thing. That's what I'm talking about. So that's what we're doing. Okay. So then we're going to build this backwards. We'll do the triad, and then we'll add the 7 and see if I can. It's going to be harder to add like the 7 and the 9 and the 11 kind of lean backwards because we don't have the bar. So we're not going to be able to grab as much stuff. I don't do this quite as often. So I'm going to be probably a little bit more off on it. Then I might not be completely perfect, but that's the point. That's called a practice session. It's in the title, practice session. So let's do this. We're going to say let's start on the Phrygian. So I'm going to change the perspective. The first half of each of the frets is going to be the note name and the modal point. And then the second half is going to be the distance based on whatever perspective we're looking at, so we can build our chord based on distance, we're not just willy-nilly grabbing it and saying, that's the da-da. No. We're going to say this is why it is because we can name it and describe it by the point and then count it out. Then you count it out. You prove it with like logic. Okay, so this is going to be it. So I'm going to make it from the perspective. I don't know why I'm getting all upset here. I'm a little upset this morning, or this afternoon or evening, whatever. Anyways, so now we're going to say, so this is, from the Phrygian's perspective, this is a perfect first, and then here's the third, which is going to be a Mixolydian point, and then the Lydian. So that's our normal kind of triad. Now, most people kind of use the bar chords, but I think like this triad is actually easier to see from like a logic standpoint, or at least it's in the right order, right? Because you got the lowest note is the 1, and then the 3 and the 5 from a scale degree standpoint, right? 1, 3, 5. So we can name that basically by where's the last point in the modal triad. It's going to be a fifth away from a scale degree standpoint, or it's going to be 4 modal half steps away from the Phrygian. So in other words, it would be 3 plus 4, which is 7. So that means that from a point perspective, we're going from the 3 from a natural number system or Phrygian to the 7 from a natural number system or the Locrian, and then we just skip every other node to get there. So the 7, how far away is the 7? It's 7 notes away from the Phrygian node, which is 4 of the modal half steps, which are the half steps of the actual 7-note collection out of the 12-note collection, and we call that a scale degree of 5, which we just throw in a P, which is useless. The perfect is useless if you have the notes of 7 notes away. We should remove the P entirely and add the number. What is the P telling you? Nothing. If you have the number, if you have the distance in notes, why in the world you have the number? You don't need the. Why would we replace the number with a P? It doesn't to give you any added information. And then but if you count up from, so then we could call this, then it's a 3/7 modal chord. You could call it by distance, like it's a triad Phrygian chord, which would be a minor chord, an E minor, but I'm trying to remove the E. So it's because I want to make it all relative positions so I can write my music and transpose it through all 12 positions on the fretboard. So I call it a 3-note Phrygian chord, or I can call it a Phrygian 2 modal whole step chord, because you start on the Phrygian and you go 2 modal whole steps up to get to the end point, and then you take every other note in the 7-note collection to get there. Or you can name it by endpoint, which would be the 3/7 chord, 3/7 modal range chord, a PN modal range chord, Phrygian Locrian modal range chord, the Phryg Loc modal range chord by color, sky blue to the yellow modal range chord. We name them out by saying we're on the Phrygian plus 2, which is a modal whole step, or 2 modal half steps, gets you to the Mixolydian, which is the 5 from a Nashville number system, has a distance of 2 modal half steps away, which is 3 notes away from the Phrygian node, which would be a minor third, and then 2 up from there, 5, 6, 7, gets you to the crazy Locrian. So we can actually define the triad from the Phrygian as the points. Specifically, we can be very specific and say you grab the Phrygian, the Mixolydian, and the Locrian. You grab those continents on our map of the territory at one time with your giant hand, and we go boom, because you're grabbing 3 continents from our continent. That's why you need a big hand. You don't need like a really big hand, like from human standpoints, but I'm just saying because our continent analogy, you're grabbing 3 continents with your hand. Okay, so there's that. Okay, well let's say we add let's say we want to add the 7. So we're like, okay, I want to add the 7. Well, the 7 is off by 1, so it's 6 modal half steps up. So it would be 3, the Phrygian, plus 6, which would be 9, which is over the local distance, which should be within 7, and then it keeps repeating. So we can just take 9 minus 7 is going to be 7, 8, 9, or 2. So we're looking for a 2, is that right? Yeah, so we're looking for a 2. So there's a 2 down here. So maybe with my lean back chord, that would be tough to do. That's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that is even, no, you'd have to be pretty flexible to do that with your finger gymnastics. Maybe like some of the finger gymnastic people could do that one, but we have obviously a 2 up top, but that's not gonna work. Because if this was a, so I've got one here. There we go. Yeah, what am I doing? Obviously, that's the 7. Duh. I knew that. Idiot. Okay. So, but then you lose the 5. But that's cool. So that's that like minor, that gives you your minor shape, just basically, in essence, these 3, right? So, and you can finger it like this. Maybe I can still grab this so I can toggle this way. So I can toggle between this and the 5. If you're doing bluesy stuff, then obviously that's the minor. You might do something like this, because then I can shift that 3rd up, and then you get the major 3rd would be like right there, and the bluesy stuff is often in between the major and the minor, you know. So. That's doable. I knew that, but then it gets crazy after that, because it's like, okay, so now like I've got all my fingers and I'm not barring anything really. So how in the world am I going to add the? I already lost this one in order to grab that one, but now I want the 9. I want the 9. Okay, so 9 is equivalent to the 2 that we skipped, because from a skill degree it goes 1, 3, 5. 7, 9, and so 9 is equivalent to the 2. So I could say the 2 is off by 1. So 2 minus 1 is 1 modal half step up from the Phrygian. So it's going to be 3 plus 1 is 4. So I'm looking for a Lydian. All right. So we can pick that one up, possibly. So maybe I can grab all of these and bar that. Is that even possible? Wait, no. I'd have to bar this one. Hold on. Well, first let's think about it before I mess up my fingering. So, that means that this one is going to be, how far away is the Lydian from the Phrygian? Well, it's 1 note away, meaning if I was on like this Phrygian, that's where you have the crazy 1 note away 1, which would be a 1 note away, minor second, which is only there for the Phrygian and the crazy Locrian. So Phrygian is almost as crazy as Locrian. It's more minor than the main minor because it's got a minor second, where the Aeolian doesn't even have a minor second. The minor scale doesn't even go that far, man. And then the Locrian puts a flat 5 in there, gets kicked out of the club because he went too far. No one goes flat 5. No one goes flat 5. You wonder why you're having problems? You went full flat 5, man. You went full flat 5. Okay. So we're going to say. So in any case, but it's an octave up, so normally it would be 12 plus 1, which would be like 13 away from the Phrygian, and it would be 1 modal half step up as well, which would be in the collection of notes, which would be plus 7, which would be 8 modal half steps if we take an octave into consideration, which would be a minor second. It would be a minor second. Okay, but if we take an octave into consideration, it would be second plus 7, a minor 9. So from a chord construction, so all those names get confusing. It's not my fault. I'm trying to make the easy name system, but the name system currently in place is more confusing than what I'm proposing. But we have to. I want to point it out. So then, if I bar this, or I can grab this one, but then I can't. No, that won't work, because I could try to grab like that and then still get the 5. It's almost it's almost doable. Is that right? If I grab like this and then I drop the 7 and I do that, but I can't really bar it because then I have to reveal that one. So I need this triangle shape over here. But it's easier to pick up the 7 and lose the 5, because then I can bar this. I can basically bar maybe even like this with a bar. It's easier with the pinky. It's easier to bar at least with a pinky. Maybe I put the bar way up here. See, because I can put the meat of my finger up here if I'm going to bar that bad doggy, even though I'm not. And that actually lets me reveal the 7 up top. That hurts my hand. Let's move on. Let's say we add the 11. We add the 11. So the 11 is equivalent to the 4 that we skip, because it goes scale degrees 1, 3, 5, 7, and then 9's equivalent to the 2, and the 11's equivalent to the 4. So if I say it's the 4 and the local distance minus 1 is 3, then it would be the 3 plus 3 is 6, looking for the Aeolian node, which is 3 modal half steps up. So that's right in my bar thing there as well, interestingly enough. So that means what's the distance for that one away? It's 5 notes away, or 5 plus 12 if it's an octave up, which would be 17. From the Phrygian node, it would be a 3rd modal half step, meaning stepping up from the collection of notes of the 3, because that gets me to the 6. Or if it was an octave up, it would be 3 modal half steps plus 7, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it would be I think that's right, and it would be a perfect 4th. It would be a perfect 4th. But if it was an octave up, it would be 4 plus 7, which is 11. Okay, and then so that makes sense, I think. And then what would I call this chord? Well, it would be like a 5-note Phrygian chord if we were to take all the notes starting on the Phrygian, the 3, and just take every other one until we get to 5, but then lose any of them that we need to along the way in order to get the last one in there, which would be the Aeolian. We could call it a Phrygian 10, because 10 divided by 2 is 5 modal whole steps, so it's 5 modal. So we could call it a Phrygian 5 modal whole step chord, meaning it's 5 up. We could call it an E minor 11. But if you do that, then you have to have a flat 9, because the Phrygian has that funny 9, I think. So I think you'd have to do something funny to indicate that on the Phrygian you'd have a flat 9, and you'd have the E in there. That would be an issue. You could call it by chord modal ranges if you use a modal system, though, which you could say it's a 3/6 modal range chord, a PA modal range chord, a Phrygian Aeolian modal range chord. With the abbreviation, it would be the Phryg-AO modal range chord, or from a color system, sky blue to the red modal range chord. How do you get there? You just take every other note from the 3 that's in the 7-note collection. So it'd be 3, 4, 5 to the Mixolydian, 5, 6, 7. Grab it if you can. We can't. We let it go. We let that one go because it was too difficult. It's too difficult to grab that one. And then it goes around the horn to 1, 2, which is the Dorian, and then 2, 3, 4. Grab it if you can. The Lydian. We can bar it off now. And then 4, 5, 6 is the Aeolian. And if I do that, I can also if I'm barring this bad doggy, I could bar this one down here too, which would reveal this one, which I might have to do later, and that would, because we're going to need that Ionian at some point. So we'll keep that in mind. So it would be something like I can grab these two and just same thing, but now I'm just making sure to bar down, bearing down on the bar down, baby. So I'm gonna bar this whole thing like at the top, even though I don't need to bar it at the top. So you might think, like, when you're doing this kind of bar, you might think, well, why am I barring up here when I'm trying to get like everything from here down? Well, that's because it's easier to bar this way. So I'm gonna make this big bar, even though I'm not playing this top string because I have this one in front of it. But I can bar the whole thing off like that. So it's like. Okay. Let's say we add the 11 to the 13. So we're going to add the last one, the final one. What's it got to be? It's got to be it's got to be the Ionian, right? But let's count it out. It's the 13. 13 minus 1 would be, well, the 13 is equivalent to the 6 that we skip, all the even ones we skip from a scale degree standpoint. So if I take the local distance of a 6 minus 1, it's 5 modal whole steps up, 5 modal half steps up from the node we're on, which is the 3. 5 plus 3, 5, 6, 7, 8. But 8 is greater than 7, so we're over the thing again. So we're going to say 8 minus 7 is 1, which gets us to the Ionian. Because it's a 1, which is the Ionian. Anyways, if I move this one over here, I've got to lose the Dorian. But if I'm doing this bar thing, I have a Dorian at the bottom, dude. So I could grab it down here. So what would we call this? This Ionian, which is 8 notes away, or if it was an octave up, it would be 8 plus 12 notes away from the Phrygian node, 5 modal whole steps, modal half steps away, which means that it would be 5 plus 7 would be 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It would be 12 distance away, which means it would be the 13th scale degree, right? Because we call it a minor 6. We call that a minor 6. And 6 plus 7 would be 13, a minor 13 from a chord standpoint. We could also call it from a range. It would be a 7-note Phrygian chord. You could call it an E minor, right? It would be an E minor, but it had that 9 in it that had a flat 9. So I think you'd have to say it's an E minor with a flat 9. But again, I don't want to call it from the E. I want to eliminate the note to make it all transposable and say, well, no, it would be a 7-note Phrygian, and you just skip every other note. Or to get to the end, it would be 12 steps away. 12 divided by 2 is 6. It would be a Phrygian 6 modal whole step chord. Or I define it by the endpoint. It's going to be a 3-1 Nashville number system modal range chord, or a Phrygian Ionian modal range chord, or a Phryg Ion modal range chord, or from a color system, a sky blue to a yellow green modal range chord. Okay, I think that makes sense, at least to me. Doesn't make sense to anyone else probably, but if I do that, then maybe I could just do it like with this bar. It's a funny looking bar, but simple but funny looking. It's like, wait, you got it backwards. You're supposed to put this finger down. You're barring this off, and you're supposed to put this finger down here if you bar that, but no, we're doing the reverse bar. I'm gonna start doing that, man. See, this is why you do this. This is why you... That sounds kind of tensiony because it's a Phrygian. But whatever. Let's try a joke before moving on. Maybe we can do one more. Let's get the joke practice in. All right, this joke. I tried to get ChatGTP to help me with this one, and I think Chat improved it, but I'll give you both renditions. So it's like I told Chat like improve this, and then I still had to kind of adjust it afterwards, and this is what we came up with. You know, I keep seeing these debates about artificial insemination. You know, artificial insemination and whatnot, and the big argument seems to be everyone's going to do it at some point in the future, they say, because there's less risk of like, you know, birth defects and fewer genetic defects and blah blah, all that kind of stuff, you know, because they're going to just pick, they're just going to artificially inseminate, and they can kind of figure all that stuff out. But here's the problem. Can you really pick the best sperm if they do the artificial insemination, or are they just grabbing whichever one isn't stuck to the side of the cup because it only knows how to turn left? You know what I mean? It's like we don't need a country full of participation trophy sperm people around here. I mean, I want a little tadpole gladiator who actually wins the race. That's the point. The one who proves his head is hard enough to knock a hole in the egg large enough for him to actually climb into and whatnot. That's so artificial insemination feels like it's like picking a winner of like 10,000 person marathon by saying, hey, let's just remove the ones that don't have any legs, and then we'll just randomly select from there. That's not how you do it. This is America, dang it. That's not how you pick a winner. So that's my thing. Because if they, I don't know how they, seriously though, I don't know how they do it, right? Because all they're doing is saying, I would think they're just saying this one doesn't look like it's like got AIDS or something, right? Or whatever. It doesn't look like it's got, but then that would be the majority of them, right? So how do you, like, so if you pick the ones that are defected out, then, okay. But then how do you pick, then you just randomly pick from the rest of the thing? Like, how do you, like, and you just like, okay, whatever, the rest of them are all the same. No, they're not the same. They need to run the, okay, this is the one I came up with before I had Chat do it. So I see this debate about artificial insemination, the argument being that everyone will do it because it lowers the risk of birth complications and defects. But I wonder if artificial insemination can really pick the best sperm instead of just some unstuck one. I mean, I want a little guy who actually wins the race, you know? I feel like the artificial insemination thing, it just makes sure you don't pick a bad one. The sperm need to have an actual race to the egg and prove their little tadpole head is hard enough to headbutt the hole into the egg so that it can like climb into it. Artificial insemination is like, it's like picking a winner of a 10,000 person marathon by not choosing the guy with no legs. This is America. That's not how you pick a winner. I don't know. I think they're pretty similar, but but Chat gave me a couple ideas that I then picked up on. So I don't know. It just rewords my language sometimes in a way that I just kind of messes it up. But, you know, whatever. Anyway, let's go to the next one back here. We're going to say, let's go from the Dorian. All right. Okay, so the Dorian standard, this is another minor mode. Another minor mode chord. So if I was to start here, we'd go, okay, boom. The standard triad is like, okay, the minor is back here. All right, it's a minor third instead of a major third, which would be right here. So it's like a minor G shape. which is less familiar to most people in open position. But if this is like a G shape, you would think you'd flat the third and the minor would look something like that, right? So I mean, okay, so then I'm gonna say it, or then it's a minor, top of the minor G shape, but a D chord or a Dorian chord. So same shape to start off with. It's still a minor triad, but this time it's a minor D triad, but I'd rather call it at least a minor Dorian versus the minor Phrygian if you want to still use the minor terminology, but you don't need it because I'm just going to say it's the Dorian triad, which I already know is a minor. Why? Because it's a minor mode. That's where the minor, okay. So how do we define, how do we define this? The endpoint is the fifth. The last note in the triad is the fifth. So we're going to say 5 minus 1 is 4 modal half steps up. So 4 modal half steps from the 2 would give us the 6. So the endpoint is the 6. And we can see that the 6 has a, wait a sec, is that right? Yeah. And this, well, no, I'm looking at it from the wrong angle. I'm going to change my second numbers here from the perspective of the Dorian with my super cool worksheet. I can't believe I don't have people knocking down my door for this worksheet, for crying out loud. Look at this. Look at this thing. I mean, this, no one has a worksheet out there that's anywhere near as effective for the Pythagorean music school. We need the Pythagorean math-related music school, because what we currently have is the Pythagorean school. We need the Pythagorean school because right now we got a Pythagorean school of, okay, I'm getting distracted. This one, so now the second one is properly made now. So this one is going to be 7 notes away from the Dorian node, which would be 4 modal half steps up, which would be the 5th scale degree, which we call a perfect fifth. Okay, so we can call this a 3-note Dorian. So you just pick every other note from the Dorian in the collection of notes until you get 3 of them. Or we can call it a Dorian 2 modal whole step chords, meaning you start on the Dorian and you go 2 modal whole steps to get to the last bit, and you take every other place along the track as you go around it. Or you can name the endpoints and call it's a Dorian Aeolian chord, or from a Nashville number system, a 2/6 modal range chord, or it's a Dor Ao chord, or it's a spring green to red modal range chord. Okay, so you go from the 2, and then 2 plus 1 modal whole step, which is 2 modal half steps, gets you to the 4, which is the Lydian. And the Lydian, therefore, is a distance of 3 notes away from the Dorian node, which is 2 modal half steps up, which would be the 3rd scale degree, which we call a minor third. And if you go 2 up from the 4, you get to the 6, which is the Aeolian, which we already said is a 7-note away from the Dorian node, 4th modal half step, which is a perfect fifth. Boom. Okay. So then let's add the 7. So the 7 minus 1 is 6, meaning there's a 6 modal half step distance from the 2. 6 plus 2 is 8. 8 is over the 7 local distance, so 8 minus 7 is 1, and 1 is the Ionian. So the Ionian right there, as we can see, has a distance from the Dorian of 10 notes away, because there's 5 notes between the strings, so it just goes 5, 10, and 10 notes away from the Dorian node, which is 6 modal half steps away if we just look at the 7-note collection, which would be a 7th scale degree, which we call a minor 7. The minor 7 being actually the more ubiquitous of the 7s, major versus minor, 10 note away minor, 11 note away major, because it's in all the minor modes, which means it's in the minor chords, which would be the Dorian, Aeolian, Phrygian, Plus, it's in the Mixolydian. So the 11 note away is only there in the major mode, Ionian, and the Lydian. And people don't play Lydian that much because although people don't call Lydian crazy like they do with the Locrian, it still has that 6-note distance in it, which kind of messes things up. So, but in any case, so what do we call this then? I would call it a 4-note. You could call it a D minor 7 chord, but I'd rather take the D out of it and say that it's just a 4-note Dorian chord because that's more specific. It tells you where you're at. Or you can call it's a Dorian 3 modal whole step chord, meaning you take the Dorian note and you go 3 modal whole steps up, which is going to be 6 modal half steps up for the 7-note collection. Or you name it by modal range, which means it's going to be a DI modal range, a Dorian Ionian modal range, a Dor-Io modal range, or a 2-1 modal range. From a color system, it would be a spring green to a yellow green modal range chord. Okay, how do you count it out? Well, you just start on the 2, and then you go up to the 4, which is the Lydian, which, as we saw, was 3 notes away from the Dorian node, 2 modal half steps, which would be a 3rd scale degree or a minor 3rd. 4, 5, 6 would take you to the next one, which is the Aeolian node, which would be 7 notes away from the Dorian node. 4 modal half steps, which would be 5 scale degree, otherwise known as a perfect 5th. And 6 plus 2 is 7, and then around the horn of 1, because there's only 7 in the 7-note collection, getting us to the Ionian, which, as we saw, is a 10-note away, that cool bluesy distance of a Dorian 6 modal half steps, which would be a minor 7. Okay, so I could play it like this again, same shape we saw before, because I'm going to keep this shape and put my pinky down, because then I can toggle. But it's actually easier to play if I switch my fingers to like this, either with my pinky, and then I can kind of mute the rest of this, or you can play it with try to reach it with your pointer like that, and then you can kind of slide up, then you can kind of slide this up to get between the major and the minor. Let's add the rest and see if we get that same bar system that we saw before. So let's say I'm going to bring this back and say we go from the 7 to the 9. The 9 is equivalent to the 2 that we skipped from a scale degree standpoint, so I could just go to the local distance of 2 minus 1 would give me 1 modal whole step away from the Dorian node, which would be 2 plus 1 or 3. So I'm looking for the Phrygian, which would be right there. So there's a Phrygian, right? And so that would be different. Now that's different, right? Because remember that the Phrygian, when I was playing on the Phrygian, that's the one that had only 1 half step away from it. So now if I start on the Dorian, I have a 2 note away 2nd scale degree or 1st modal half step. So which is more normal, but actually makes it a little bit harder to bar off if I'm going to bar this bad dog. Because, okay, so we're going to say, so that one happens to be 2 notes away, or now because I'm up an octave up, it would be 2 plus 12 or 14 notes away if I add an octave. And from the Dorian node, 1st modal half step, or 1 plus 7, 8 modal half steps up, which means it would be the 2nd scale degree or 9 scale degree, which would be a major 2nd or major 9, however you want to call that. All right, and so what would it? So it would be, you could call that then a D11. So now it's a D9 chord, which I don't think you need to do anything special to it like you did with the Phrygian, because the 9 isn't weird. It's a normal 2 note away second or first modal whole step. So, but I'd rather remove the D and call it just a 5-note Dorian. Just take every other one till you get 5 notes, or a Dorian 4 modal whole step chord, because 4 modal whole steps gets you to the end point. 4 times 2 is 8 modal half steps. Or you can call it a DP modal range chord, a 2-3 modal range chord, a Dorian Phrygian modal range chord, a Dor Phryg modal range chord, or color system, a spring green to sky blue modal range chord. Let's see if we can finger that thing. It's going to be here, here, here. Was I doing this from the proper perspective last time? I might have been doing this whole thing. Now I'm thinking I messed up my fingering again. Whatever, I don't know. All the relative positions you can. It's practice session. it's practice session. So. I feel like I messed up before. I don't know. Was I doing the whole thing from the. Anyway. Whatever. So it would be. Not quite as dissonancy, because it doesn't, because that 2 is further away. A little bit more pleasant a sound, although more difficult to play. Maybe I could. But I dropped, to do that, I dropped the 7, obviously. I'm dropping the 7 and picking up I'm dropping, yeah. So I could try, is there any way I can drop this one and grab that? So, no, this ain't right. This isn't right. You're not doing it right, dude. It's this here, be here, here, and then here. And then if I drop this, then I grab that. Is that what I was doing? I don't think that's what I was doing before. But I could try to say I want this, 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 and this. Meaning I'm trying to grab like this. So now I drop the 5 and pick up the 7. My head is starting to hurt here. That's doable. It's a pleasant sound. I'm a little tired. I think I'm just gonna noodle around. I might have to finish that one off maybe tomorrow, because I. get my finger in on these bottom two strings down here. It sounds kind of.